Good evening. You're attending a session of the Board of Adjustments.
Just a quick reminder, thank you. Make sure you turn your mics on.
Sorry. Good evening. You're attending a session of the Board of Adjustments. I didn't get a script. What script are we using?
Well, tonight we're
Just
adopting
using the old one?
script, so.
Okay. Can we have a roll call, please?
John Moreland.
Here.
Owen Curley.
Here.
Jeff Trular.
Here.
Jennifer Williams. Here. Matt Metz.
Here.
Laura Tierney. Douglas Dell.
Here.
Okay. I don't have a agenda. Sorry. Somebody have an agenda? I could. Or I'll just. Sorry. Thank you. I didn't think we were gonna. Okay. We don't have any minutes to approve. We don't have any correspondence. We don't have any old business. So our new business is the annual business meeting elections. So, what do we have to do for that?
So as it's written in the new bylaws, and this is taking kind of a page out of our old city attorney Sandy's book, in essence, since you're electing a chair, Nevs would be the one to take motions and then call for the vote, and then whoever becomes chair, they can run it from that point as far as vice chair.
Okay, I see. Okay, so so do you have to do a motion for chair, or does anybody just say they want to be?
Yeah, I mean, you can nominate somebody. There's not really a formal process, so
All right.
it's probably good to have something that sets it on the record.
I think I've only done it for 1 year, so it's a 2-year term.
Up to 2 years.
Up to 2 years, yeah. Is that a subtle hint?
Okay. Thank you. There'll be a chicken in every pot. Chocolate in your pot. Okay. All right. And then is there a nomination for vice chair?
I just have to, as my communication is guarded on my commitment. I mean, I've committed to everything I can. It's just challenging for me when this year coming up. It's hard for me to accept the vice chair. I just don't want to disappoint the position. So right now, it's pretty good.
I'm not on the board, so.
I know, I've emailed everybody.
Yes.
Oh, okay, I got you.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, you don't have to accept the vice chair. You can.
I struggle trying to.
Anybody else want to be vice chair? Need a vice chair.
He makes it look easy.
You just have to read. We need a nomination.
Well, not next, vice chair.
Okay.
This is
Do you want to be the vice chair?
That's fine.
All right, Matt's going to be the vice chair. All right. Anybody else? Okay, then we do a vote.
Yeah, I mean, that's typically how it's done. So.
Okay, so I'd be the chair and Matt would be the vice chair. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, there we go. And so now, thank you. Congratulations to you, Matt. So we have to adopt the Board of Adjustments bylaws. So we have a new set of bylaws. I hope everybody has had a chance to read them.
They are not substantially different from what you guys saw last time. We did make a couple tweaks to try and make them consistent from board to board. But just to walk you through it, there are things in here that are replicated in the code, particularly things like how council puts people on the board and things along that nature. But what we've done is we've taken most of the board running procedural stuff out of the code and put it in bylaws that you guys can amend that have some flexibility and allow you to do things to basically make your meeting more of a personal running event. So the powers and duties are taken right out of the code. Qualifications, appointments, terms of office, removals from office. I know a number of years ago when Alexi was still here, we had an issue with how the code had written, like how we deal with attendance and reporting stuff, and it ended up that she had to write a letter to the mayor, and it was really awkward for everybody. So we've changed that, basically saying that we'll keep track of it. We will let the council know, and they can do whatever they want. It doesn't fall on the chair to have to do anything. Basically, between the clerk and I, if we notice an issue that, we can move that forward. But again, there's a lot more in here about notifying staff or notifying the chair ahead of time. And then that can be, an excused absence, as it were. So really, it's for just somebody who decides they're just going to walk away. So it's just more of a courtesy to let the other board members know if you can in advance. Otherwise, we'll send it out as part of the notice that we give you guys. Let's see. So the other thing we did is we added a thing called the chair pro tem. We've had a number of cases at Planning Commission where the chair and vice chair were both out and did not have a process by which to have somebody run the meeting. And we kind of invented one, and it did not go well. So what we've done is basically set it up so that at the beginning of the meeting, if the chair and vice chair aren't there, the board just elects somebody as the chair pro tem for that meeting, and they would just run the meeting, which is why everybody has the scripts and things in the back of the bylaws, so you can refer to those. It's very simple, but that way it officially has someone designated as the chair. Let's see. So meeting schedule is something new. We've taken the requirement of the day and time out of the city code and put it into the bylaws. So the only caveat is that our meetings are designed to be held after 5:30, which I believe is reflected in state law for some things, mostly for councils, not for you guys, but generally it's been the policy that we do these in the evenings. I know that Planning Commission's probably going to move their meeting because it has always conflicted with the council briefings, and so they have to wait and start at 7, so we'll probably be shifting that around, but if you guys want to think about it, there are, I think Wednesdays and Thursdays are also potentially available, if that is something you guys want to consider. Right now, we're probably going to have the Planning Commission move to the opposite Tuesday of you guys, so it'll be a little more consistent for the public, but again, that's going to be totally up to you guys. Let's see.
Sorry, you're saying we may be moving our dates up?
I'm saying if you want to, you can now. Before, it was literally like day in the code, had no exceptions.
So we have the flexibility to move.
Mhm. Yeah.
The board decides to move.
Exactly.
But for that, we would still have to look at the potential conflicts for the room. And so
Yeah,
we
the clerk's
probably
office
aren't gonna
runs
be
the
moving.
reservations. That's why I said that right now, for you guys, you have this Tuesday and then Wednesday and Thursday as options, but also the time when you meet can move around. Let's see. We did put a provision in here for an agenda review. I've done this with a lot of different boards. Basically, if the chair wants to get together and you've got a whole big docket of things you want to know about it, we can go over that. It's not a conflict because it's you're meeting with staff, just to familiarize the chair with all the items and any feedback that we've gotten. So when it comes time to run the meeting, they've got a good idea. They're not just going in blind. It is entirely optional. Simply something I wanted to offer.
Can the chair and vice chair ask to have a meeting with you together?
If they did, it would have to be a noticed advertised meeting. They can meet one-on-one. Like I said, in the past, I've usually just done it with whoever's going to be at the meeting. So if the vice chair knows he's going to run the meeting ahead of time, I'll do that. But again, it's totally optional for you guys. It's not a requirement. Let's see.
Sorry, going back to that for just a second.
Yeah.
The vice chair or the vice chair can meet with city staff before the meeting to maybe clarify some questions they may have. Before the
Yeah, you guys are welcome to meet with us anytime you want. It's just one-on-one.
It doesn't have to be notified.
No, you're meeting with staff. There's no. The only sunshine rule pertains to two people on the same board talking to each other about business. So you guys are welcome to email me with questions, or I would say don't call just because my voicemail is like. But yeah, I mean, anything, not even just related to the bylaws. I think so. The other important note is that the bylaws are both approved and amended by you guys, but it'll be a vote of the entire board, including the alternates, because these things will affect them as well. So it's a simple majority if you want to vote on something to change in the bylaws, but you'll have participation from the alternates as well. What I told the Planning Commission, kind of reflecting the same thing here, I think it would be best, because we've never done this before, to, unless there's something glaring that you want to change tonight, adopt this in substantially similar format, and then we'll try it out. And if there's something that doesn't work, we can fix it. Because again, we don't have to schedule it or do anything. I mean, we can put it on the agenda, obviously, but like, there's no advertising, there's no notice. It's just procedural for you guys to go ahead and change that. So, like I said, unless there's something obviously terrible, I would say we try it out for a little while, and then we're probably going to go back and do some amendments to the land development code after we find all the mistakes that we made. So it's going to be kind of a repetitive process, to address it. But if it works great, then, we're done.
Okay. With that glowing endorsement, is there a motion to adopt these bylaws?
Second.
Okay, the motion has been to adopt the bylaws, which are dated April 14th, 2025, and it's been seconded. Any discussion? Okay, seeing no discussion, can we have a roll call vote, please?
John Moreland,
Yes.
Jeff Trular,
Yes.
Jennifer Williams, Matt Metz,
Yes.
Owen Curley.
Yes. Okay, the bylaws have been adopted. Okay, and now we're on to the land development code training.
All right. Just a quick reminder. You notice that we don't get massive feedback anymore with these. That's because the microphone next to you isn't picking up the person who doesn't have their mic on. So make sure you have your mics on to talk. Otherwise,
Can we just leave them on?
you can. It's just, if you're not, anything you say will be picked up and broadcast that way. So you have the option of turning them off. But if you don't have it on, the tape's not going to hear it. The public probably won't hear it either.
But it won't get the feedback. I won't,
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. I'm going to cover kind of some changes specifically to your guys' process and how the new code is going to approach variances. Heather's going to go over some of the highlights after that with other substantial changes that we've made in the code as a whole, so you kind of have a feeling on how that's going to work. But some of you have seen this in its original form. I've made some changes to reflect the changes here, but I'm going to probably speed through the things that aren't 100% relevant right now. One other thing that we did put, I'm pretty sure, in the bylaws is that we're going to do basically an annual procedural training for you guys. So like we did that, 3 years ago, we had the other attorney come in, do some model motions, let everybody try out being chair if they want. That way everyone's more comfortable, and then we can, have a refresher on sunshine and that kind of stuff. So that'll be something that we'll do on a regular basis, similar to this. So we want to familiarize you guys with basically the much more standard practice that you'll find in both state statutes and 99% of the other cities. We've been a very strange outlier up to this point. So we want to make you guys comfortable with how it's intended to work now. That's just what I said. Okay, so obviously this seems pretty straightforward, but in essence, you're approving somebody to do something that would otherwise be illegal under the code. Just as an example, if somebody is required to have 100 parking spaces, they have to have 100 parking spaces. You guys saying, oh, you only need 60, that's a relief from the laws under the code. So if they are supposed to have them, you guys don't grant them any relief, technically they're in violation. They can go through the code enforcement process. So this is kind of where things are going to get a little bit different. Traditionally, we've been very broad in what we've interpreted to be a hardship, predominantly because very few of the properties in the city had any correlation to the minimum lot sizes and ability to have setbacks and things like that. One of the things that we've changed in the new code is we've reduced the minimum lot size to match the lots that are on the ground as best we can based on averages. So, like RS1 went from 10,000 to 9,000. I think RS3 is 5,000 now. And we've also changed some of the setbacks. And then we've changed lot coverage. I'll get to that in a little bit. So, in essence, the traditional interpretation of a variance is that if the lot is such a, has so many restrictions that they can't do what they would normally be allowed to do. So, in this case, let's say it's a question of building a single family home. If it's in a single family zoning district like RS1, that's really the only use you can have there. So, if they can't use that property, then that property has no value. In that sense, you would basically grant relief for them to build that house within as much of the code as you can. So if they need minimum setback relief or a little bit of lot coverage, it's really supposed to be proportional to what everybody else has legally. So if their lot's 8,000 square feet, they don't really get much to bring them into compliance with what everybody else has. In essence, it's not something to get a use that's not allowed or change the densities that are allowed, or just because they want to, or they want to build a bigger house or make more money, or whatever those reasons are. In commercial particularly, under the state law and under many rulings through the court system, if you can't do anything, that is considered a taking in the sense that you've devalued that person's property. If they can only do one thing, but that's a thing that's allowed in the code, that's fair. You've given them value and use to their property. So kind of a, again, sort of long-standing tradition is that how do I say this? The standards in our code are to be basically strictly followed and adhered to. The relief granted to people is not something that should be doled out easily. Typically in cities, they're very rarely used. I've said this a number of times, but in the city of Jacksonville, they do less variances than we do, and they're 100 times bigger. So one of the things we've always kind of struggled with is the sense of like, what is a hardship and what's a self-imposed hardship? Under the new code, as I've said, we've tried to create a situation where most of these lots now are legal and they won't have a hardship in that sense. Now, the structure could still have been built a long time ago and that may cause some complications, but in essence, the self-created aspect of variances has changed. And that's kind of one of the big things you guys are going to have to take into consideration as you go through this, that if somebody has a substandard lot that, maybe isn't a platted lot but existed 30, 40 years, they're buying that lot knowing that it's too small because they have to do their due diligence when they buy the property. That is, in essence, self-imposed. Now, that doesn't mean they don't qualify for a variance, but it does mean that there are going to be some limitations on that. It's going to be more of a strict, you have to really have an actual 0.2 reason.
So I mean, let's just go back to that because we've seen that, and that's bone to pick, which I think is right. But these guys buy these super small lots, which were then non-conforming, and then they want a variance for everything to put a house on it, and what is our approach under the new land development code going to be different? That we
Yes, this is a fundamental change for you guys.
So we can look at that and say, the behavior is your behavior that you bought a small lot and now you can't put anything on it. Or
right.
Something really small.
So in essence, the city can't have a regulation that prevents any use of the property.
Right.
And the term reasonable is sometimes used. The easiest way to think about it, like I said, it's kind of like that single family element. If you can't build the house, they're entitled to some relief so they can build the house. And our zoning districts have a minimum house size and requirements, so that's basically what they should be granted. Anything more than that is because they want it.
What is that minimum, by the way?
It's different based on the each zoning district. So
Yeah.
we'll go through some of that,
Okay.
but
This will also apply in the staff's report.
oh, absolutely,
Right? This
yeah.
will be more
Mm-hmm.
forward-written in the staff report.
Right.
Recommendation.
Yeah. I mean, also on the staff side, we're going to explain to people that, this is not something that we're going to support. This is not something the board will probably support.
Right.
Maybe change your plans.
Let's make this.
And again, the reason we've always been a little lax on that is because we had 80% of the city was non-conforming. And so you were in a situation where nobody could legally do anything. And that's not a good place to be. And we've used variances as sort of a relief valve for problems with the code. Now, hopefully, the code is right, and we don't have to do as much of that. The other thing that we've talked about in the past, the hardship has to be related to the property or the structure, and not simply because I can make more money building a bigger house. We had talked in the past that obviously this will come up a few times, but nothing you guys do sets any precedent. As I'd said before, the major issues that we've seen over the years, we've tried to find the middle ground where council was happy with, allowing some leeway in design and lot coverage and setbacks to solve some of the problems that we've been basically resolving with hundreds of variances. So this included things like I said, minimum lot sizes, and I'll go over the lot coverage stuff in a little bit. But in essence, finding that hardship is going to be very obvious that it's there or it isn't.
So we're going to see a lot of, like if we'll see variance requests on irregular shaped lots, but maybe not so much people coming in saying, "Hey, I bought a really small lot."
Yeah, I think you'll probably see a lot of them for a while because people are going to try and push the envelope. But I think once it gets out that these are the new rules and we're sticking to them, it'll slow down eventually. But that might take 6 months or a year. Now, that's not to say there aren't lots that qualify. But the other thing that we have that hasn't necessarily come up because we weren't always tracking it, not every lot is a legal lot. There are a number of lots that are created when somebody splits a property that are not conforming. And because they didn't split the lot through our process, we don't have to consider it buildable. We don't have to give them anything. They've made an illegal lot.
Really?
Yes.
Is that
Wow.
where the county has predefined those lot splits? What's the difference?
So the county does not regulate what people do with their property. And actually, the state statute specifically says that the property appraiser can have no role in that. So if somebody comes into the property appraiser and splits their property, they will say, sure, here's a new parcel number. Because they can't get involved in that. They don't want to know what our code says. They aren't interested, and they're not allowed. So ideally, somebody will come to us before that, and we'll tell them what they can do, but that's not always what happens. And when they produce a lot that can't in some way be tied back to either a historic lot of record or a historic plat, it's just a too small lot.
Yeah, I think that's where I'm confused is I think what we've observed is there are homes that are built across two platted lots. And then those homes are torn down. And the person that purchases the property says, I have these two lots that are no good. And so in that situation, they were already platted that way. Would that qualify what you're saying as an illegal lot or no? Because they were platted that way, those are legal lots and we have to consider them as undersized lots and appropriate variances in that small space because they were pre-platted. Even though the historical use was a home that was on a significantly sized lot, that the owner decided to split essentially by tearing down the home and taking advantage of the lot.
Our code defines non-conforming lots and lots of record as basically anything that was historically platted and anything that was created prior to the adoption of the comp plan in the early 90s. So because of that, those lots have always been there. That person has always had the entitlement to those lots. And by splitting them, they're not doing anything that wasn't already theirs to do. If they wanted to take those
and
lots...
that doesn't change when it changes ownership, right? Like the
No.
owner of the first house sells the house and both lots that it's on, and the person that acquires it still acquires those rights of the separate
Correct.
property.
Yeah, they're tied to the property, specifically that plat. Now, second part of your question, those lots will likely now fall into the conforming category in that they will be the right size and won't qualify.
I've heard that a lot in the review meetings. I disagree. In
I
terms of the ones that we've observed that have come to us, it might be that there are a lot of lots out there that will happen, but the ones that come to us would still be unconforming on most of what has come through in the new land development. Like it gets closer, but
I mean, there are always going to be lots that don't conform, and part of that is because it's difficult to change somebody's zoning without crossing that line into a taking. And so we didn't want to mess with the zoning lines, so we tried to do as much as we could inside each zoning category. Yes, there are definitely plats that don't meet the minimum; those we'll have to deal with. And you know, I don't think there are that many vacant lots out there anymore. People are really, when they're looking for houses to tear down, that means they're scrounging up whatever's left. I saw that happen in Riverside, but it's definitely going to be less. It won't be none.
I just don't think we've seen a lot of people splitting lots as much as leveraging the pre-platted split that
Yeah,
wasn't
I mean,
used in the past.
Again, it's an entitlement they already have, but we do have a number of people that have split lots illegally, typically after they've constructed whatever it is they were making, and then when that person buys it, they're kind of getting, you know, a lot that they don't even think is too small because it looks fine and it was platted, or
Where
not
that-
platted, but it was split by the county.
Where we've seen that is where somebody asked to build a structure in their backyard, like a live-in, like a separate house,
Mhm.
and then have it sort of attached with like a walkway.
Yeah.
And then we allow that, and then they go and split the property,
Mhm.
and then the person who buys the small thing says, "Well, I need a variance now to do whatever, you know."
Right,
to
and
put
we'll
in a
say, well,
pool.
no, because we have a record of that not being a lot, and you
Right.
guys have split it illegally.
Yeah.
Enjoy your time.
And that should well, hopefully that will restrict that.
But in that example, the person that asks has already paid for a property they didn't know
That's
wasn't.
right.
So it's like
Yeah.
didn't
Again,
do
that
their due
falls under-
diligence.
That falls
their
under
issue.
the due diligence of purchasing property. I mean, you get a survey, you see what come talk to the city. I mean, obviously I know this because I do this for a living, but certainly when I bought my property, I talked to the neighbors, I did all that stuff. To your point about the additions with the walkway, that's changed in the code. It now has to be an air-conditioned connection, and it can't be more than 10 feet long. So they can do a slightly separate addition. They can do like a bathroom, pool house kind of thing, but it literally has to be part of the house. So if somebody decides they want to try and split it, well, you've got AC ducts and electrical and all those things that are tied together, because you only get 1 meter and you only get one electrical panel. So hopefully that'll solve some of that, and we'll get into the separate dwelling units towards the end. But again, I want to is not a reason. Going back to that, lowest intensity, as long as they can do something with the property, that reasonable use pretty much means whatever the minimum is, the lowest intensity, if that's a single family home, whatever the smallest single family home that's allowed, we would give them relief for that. But not because the lot's, 10% too small, they get a 100% lot coverage. Like, it's going to be something specifically proportioned to say, everyone in this zoning district gets this, you have a little bit less, we'll give you a little bit to make you basically whole as though you were on a regular property.
Is there a measurement that you use for that, or percentage, or how do you?
Yeah, I mean, in essence, there's lot coverage that determines what, the limits of the house are. The code has some requirements for how big the air-conditioned space of the house needs to be. And when you put those two things on the plat or on the piece of paper, it'll show you what the setbacks need to be. And at that point, you can kind of determine how much lot coverage they might need based on what they should have if they were a full-size lot, and then what setbacks they would need if the lot was big enough.
Is there any, if we turn down a variance and it's a 25% reduction, does that still apply in the new code?
Yes, we do have some provisions for subsequent applications. Heather will probably touch on that. It's a little bit different than what we've had before.
Okay, so we're going to be covering that later? Okay.
Yeah.
I'll touch on that. Thank you.
What's our ability to use our judgment around what seems reasonable? So I'll give the example of why I'm asking the question. And I don't know the new lot sizes, but I think RS1 used to be 10,000 feet, but then you'd have a lot that was like 5,200.
Mhm.
and they're like 35% of 10,000 is 3,500 feet, so we want 3,500 feet on 5,000, and they're now at 66, and us to say, we recognize you're in an undersized lot. We're not going to give you 66% coverage. We think 50% is reasonable, though that's less square footage than a full lot might have relative to the lot that you have that we feel like meets your need. Like, that's pretty gray and nuanced into whoever's on the board coming up with an arbitrary number. So I don't think that that's necessarily direction, but I'm just curious, what's our ability to do something like
so
that?
actually, that hopefully will be more of what you guys can do. Like I said, in the code, we're trying to give very specific, this is the minimum thing you can do. So in this case, the minimum sized house to meet the requirements of the code, this is how much lot coverage that would give you. And then you get this much more for impervious surface for like sheds and stuff like that. The intent, we split the lot coverage question. Like, lot coverage now is only for the house and driveway. And then there's a 15% additional impervious surface ratio for anything else. AC pads, pool decks, all that kind of stuff. One of the things we're hoping to be very strict on is that percentage stays that percentage. So somebody can't say, well, I want to get 50 for the house. Well, no, you get 35 for the house and driveway. And the driveway is one that a lot of the developers are upset about. But it's always been 35% for the house and driveway and other stuff. So we've actually moved that line. Hopefully, as we do the staff reports, we'll give you guys the tools to decide, we recommend this lot coverage, these setbacks based on this information. So you're not grasping at straws.
I guess what I'm getting at is, what is our ability to use judgment versus be formulaic in those exceptions? Do we need to apply a consistent formula across the board, or is, by the nature of a variance, us providing an exception and us being able to say this is what the board feels?
If it was
appropriate?
a 100% strict thing, we wouldn't have a board to decide it. Your judgment is part of what is built into the process, and obviously communally, your judgment as well. I would say being consistent is good, and more importantly, tying your discussion and decision to the evidence you have at hand. If there's, a reasonable amount of lot coverage that makes sense based on everything you're given, and it's not what they're asking for, you can point to that. Or, any of the other new relevant code changes that we've made to say, you get this, and this is actually pretty good, so we're going to give you a little bit extra to make it work, but again, you have to meet that minimum standard. And again, think of reasonable use as only use, lowest possible use, because that pretty much checks the same box.
Christian, just a quick question. So, like a hardship that a neighbor might say they have because of the change that's being proposed, that's irrelevant. It's all focused on just the use of the land, correct?
Yeah, so the neighboring property should have no bearing on
Okay.
what you guys look at, unless it's something like a conflict between an existing structure that might be on the property line and what they're asking for. There may be some, obvious relevant things, but all your decisions are going to be based on what the applicant provides, what the staff report says, and anything you take in during the meeting, whether that's more testimony or, handouts that somebody brings. But that's the bulk of evidence. That's why it's quasi-judicial. If it was formally judicial, everything would be through like a discovery process. This is sort of the easy, gentle version of that.
Thanks.
Let's see. Where are we? Hello? Okay.
Going back to that last slide, it sounds to me as though on the one hand, we want to get stricter. And as long as there is a legitimate use, they're not eligible for variance. But on the other hand, we talk about the fact that we may give them a variance to do what they want to do with the property, not necessarily what is another reasonable use that would suggest that they cannot or should not have bought the property.
Yeah, so because they want it is basically not a reason for you guys to grant a variance. It's
That would eliminate about 90% of the variance requests.
that's the point. And again, we've tried in the code to give a little bit there as well, because 15%, that pretty much is the thing that people need after. Because we did a lot of analysis on the historic last 5 years of variances, and typically the average request was about 48%. And a lot of that was driven by patios or small additions or, pool decks and things like that. So we have built in an extra 15% for all those accessories. And therefore, the need for the variance won't be there. So the swimming pool guys shouldn't be coming back to you unless there's a really obvious reason why they need relief. And just because I want a bigger swimming pool or my outdoor kitchen needs a bigger roof, sorry, man, your lot's 50 feet wide. I don't know what to tell you. And this is, again, kind of the demonstrated hardship is related to any reasonable use. The question of whether the action is self-created, if it creates an economic disadvantage to the owner or the investor, or because the applicant purchased the property with a very obvious problem that in itself doesn't limit the use of the property. So if you bought an oddly shaped lot, you can still fit your house, you can still fit your pool, but you can't build a giant house on it. Sorry, you bought a weird lot. But if that lot will not let you build a house, then they might qualify for some relief.
Could you repeat that? I didn't hear the last part of what you said.
So because you have an odd-sized lot, as long as you can build the house there within the confines, you don't need relief. If you want to build a bigger house, that's not a reason to grant them relief because the minimum is all that they're entitled to. If they bought a weird lot, they're knowingly buying that lot with the limitations, especially people who are doing development. They know what they're getting into. So that it won't be a reason because they want to build a 3-story, 8,000 square foot house. Well, only 5,000 square feet fit here. Again, the hardship is tied to the land and the structure, not the project, not what they want to do. It is very strict to, is the land weird or is the structure old, and how those two things are going to relate to each other. So, we've kind of changed some of the language in the code to help reflect this. And so our new language, actually this part is pretty similar, but in essence it's saying that the deviation from the terms of the LDC won't create a public nuisance and won't violate the comp plan and won't create any kind of precedent for the future. So I'll use the 10-foot wide house as an example. That lot was 25 feet wide. It was the only one in that plat that was 25 feet wide. We don't know why it was there. That builder got, well, he didn't get any relief, but he was able to build the house in the confines of that with weird, gymnastics. But had you granted relief for that, that is no reason to assume the next guy who's got a lot in the same subdivision is entitled to all that relief. Because obviously his limitations were such that if it had qualified, that lot was just impossible to build on. But, if he bought the lot knowing he could build a house but not 2 houses, again, that's on the developer. So originally our criteria, the 6 criteria under the code, really didn't line up with the standards in the state law. Also, they didn't make a lot of sense the way they were written. We have hopefully corrected that and brought them more into alignment. So these are going to be the new conditions and how they line up with the Florida law. So first criteria, there are conditions or circumstances that exist which prevent compliance with the site design, development standards, or which are unique to the parcel of land, building, or structure. That is basically saying the hardship on the property is basically preventing them from meeting the dimensional standards for the minimum use. The lot is oddly shaped and creates some hardship in that regard, or potentially it's an older house or an older commercial structure that they can't physically meet the needs there. And then a lot of times, particularly with commercial properties, it may have been running as an enterprise without any variance because it's always been that thing. And then one day they sell the property, somebody buys it. It's not obvious that they're going to have a parking issue, but they do. And there's really no way to correct that in some cases. So that may be a reason why that would get relief. the state statute requiring circumstances must be unique to the applicant's property or structure, not shared by other properties within the area. So if I have a 50 by 100 lot and my neighbor has a 50 by 125 lot, and you guys grant relief on the 100 by 50 foot, you have no ties to grant the same thing on the one next door. And if the one next door is the same size as his and the one next door is the same size as his, he doesn't have a hardship. They don't all have hardship. The hardship is unique to that property. So just saying, well, I've got this tree where I want to put my pool, so I need to get relief from that. Build a smaller pool, make it a kidney shape, do whatever you have to, but your lot has to be different from the lots in the same area or in the same zoning category, significantly in some cases, to qualify. And again, this will make more sense as you guys start to do some of these, and hopefully we'll explain it in the staff report. So that's the former DCA. Basically, variances have been granted in similar situations as the applicants or in the community. None of that provides any precedent or reason to approve something in the future. This is the big one. The conditions or circumstances do not result from the actions of the applicant and would not constitute a self-imposed hardship. Our previous criteria was a little bit weirdly worded, and the state statute is basically the same thing. Prove that you didn't make this problem, you didn't buy this property with this problem, your request isn't outlandish to require relief, and we'll try and break that down in a lot more detail. We'll probably change the staff report a little bit as well. So there would be no special privilege afforded to the applicant by granting a variance that is not available to other parcels of land, building, or structures with similar conditions or circumstances. So this is that single family example. If the neighbors are entitled to build a single family home and you can't build the same sized home that the minimum for that lot, so I think RS1, it's like 1,100 square feet of air conditioned space. If your neighbor can build that and you're stuck at 1,000, well, you can't build that house legally, then they're entitled to some relief. But the guy down the street who has the same size lot as his neighbor and just wants to put more in there, sorry, this is what you bought. And again, that's why I said those relief mechanisms are going to be tied specifically to what relief is needed to meet the minimum standards for the code. But because you did this in the past, or we've always done it this way, is not a reason. Similar, but strict interpretation and enforcement of the code would deprive the applicant of the rights commonly enjoyed by other parcels of land and would provide an unnecessary or undue hardship. So you're in a plat that has 50 by 125 lots. Yours is 50 by 100. You get enough to make you whole as compared to the other lots. Not, I'm in RS1 and that guy's got a 10,000 square foot lot and he's got a 5,000 square foot house. I should be able to put 5,000 square feet on my 6,000 square foot lot. No, you get a comparable proportional similarity.
This seems distinguishable from the any use. So how do you determine when the any use policy applies and when this, because this is way more lenient. Because we're saying like we should be limiting them to any use of their property, and if it's, it should be that strict before we give them a variance. Whereas this is saying not the same use as my neighbors.
This is basically saying that if you didn't grant them a variance, they couldn't build the minimum use on that property, or couldn't build. I'm trying to think of a good example.
It's really like if I'm seeking a variance and I have a smaller lot than my neighbors, you're not saying you can't build a house. You're saying everyone else has a house and you can build a house on yours, but it just can't be as big as those other
Correct.
large
Be
lots.
the minimum house allowed.
Yeah, and you could always put that. So they've rewritten the code. So
If you
could
think
always
about it
put
in the
minimum
opposite,
But it wouldn't be
basically,
comparing to the neighbors then in that instance.
But-
no,
You know what I mean?
But I think that the comparison is they have a single family home, you get a single family home, but you don't get their single family.
Yeah.
Well, and just to make it a little bit easier, so in commercial categories, there's a whole list of uses that you can have. The I'm trying to think how to say this. So, if they can't use a variance to get more than what's allowed, is the best way to say that. If they're in a residential zoning district, they can't build an office. They can't get a variance to build an office. They can't change the things that are required to build that office, but they can get relief to build a home. So in this sense, you're looking at it pretty much by zoning district, but also kind of surrounding properties, because we do have some areas where, you know, commercial and multifamily abut. That doesn't entitle the multifamily to be commercial. So you're looking at a number of different factors, but this is really more of a limit than a carte blanche. It's saying that these are the strict things that you can do in this district and in this neighborhood, or plat, not neighborhood. And we will grant you enough leniency to be able to do the same thing. Not exactly the same thing, but roughly proportional. And there's that any use and reasonable use. And again, this is like I said, it's tied to similar properties, not necessarily exactly the same. And this is if the variance request is granted, it will make possible the reasonable use of the parcel of land, building, or structure. And reasonable use is any use. It's the minimum use. So this is in essence saying we will grant you the minimum you need to accomplish said goal of whatever use is the reasonable use of the property, but we're not going to give you more than that. Unless there's a compelling reason, and it has to be genuinely compelling. So, you know, I get an extra 15% lot coverage, but on my lot that's only, 30 square feet instead of 500. Well, you get 30 square feet in that case. You can still build a house, you can still have a little patio, but you don't get a giant patio just because your lot's a little bit smaller. This is the one that we basically got rid of the entire thing related to the comp plan because you couldn't violate the comp plan anyway, and got this back closer to what the intent of this is, which is kind of finding a balance between the community and the individual. Basically, the variance will not result in the creation of a public nuisance. A public nuisance is different than a private nuisance. So I live next door to somebody who's got a junk car and it's leaking oil, and I hate it. That is personal use. That is two property owners that have an issue between them. A public nuisance is I own a factory and it belches smoke and it flows over a neighborhood or into a school. It is literally something that affects large swaths of the city. Generally, if it's two neighbors disputing over something and they start calling code enforcement, it really isn't related to anything that we do.
Would an example be like maybe because of the variance we're giving them, they're only going to be able to park here and it's going to block visibility? Would that be an example of a public nuisance?
And that's, that's actually a perfect example. There would be some condition created that would affect the general public, either in the vicinity or who might be in the area for that period of time. If they want to build the house on the property line because their lot's narrow, that could potentially create visibility issues. It could create runoff issues. There's a lot of things that are in play. But basically, one of the things we're going to look at when we bring it to you and you need to consider is that will this create a situation that even though the applicant might need some relief, what he's asking for is going to have a bigger impact on the community, and that's not acceptable.
But what about a situation where you've got a duplex and it's rented out, each side is rented out to 4 UNF students, each of whom has a car, and there's not even a potential to have that many cars parked on the lot. So they're going to be parking on the public street. That is a nuisance. But in the past, we've said we can't take into consideration how someone, what they're going to use the land for. We are stuck with just the dimensions. Mm-hmm. And so we can't say how many students are you going to be renting to. Or can we put a limit on the number of vehicles that can be permanently attached to each side?
No. Parking on the public right of way is legal.
Parking where?
On the public right of way on the street is legal. You can park your car on the street unless it's a fire lane or something like that. And we can't regulate how many cars they own. We can regulate things like unlicensed, dilapidated cars, which can be a nuisance. But I think the minimum size of townhomes has gone down. The width of the townhome lot has gotten bigger, and the requirement for parking has gotten more substantial. So going forward, any townhouse, the lot's 25 feet wide, they have to have at least a 1-car garage, and they have to have a 2-car driveway. And that is, in essence, to try and make as much equitable change as we could to balance, again, the ability of the city to provide relief from the neighbors, so they have to have more parking, but also, not require 90% of the lot to be paved for parking. I think it's going to be one of those things that if somebody's building a new townhome and they don't want to put in 3 parking spaces, you guys look at them and say, make a smaller house. You have to have 3 parking spaces. But this one's kind of, the reason public nuisance isn't crisply defined in any code or law is because you can't anticipate what's going to be a nuisance in every case. We didn't think that LED lights were going to be a thing, and some of them fail and turn purple, and those can be a problem. We would never have thought of that as basically a nuisance. We do now, but it's always basically a kind of common sense, is this doing something to the health, welfare, well-being, enjoyment of life of the community? Getting a townhome next to you, if you're in a multifamily district, that's not necessarily an impact that is a nuisance. You may not like it, but they were entitled to build townhomes. If you let them build a townhome property line to property line, and they literally have no space to go and paint their house anymore, that could be a nuisance. And that could be something that we wouldn't want to approve. It's going to be very case by case, unless there are some obvious other standards that have been, like Clean Air and Clean Water Acts. Those have very defined things you have to do. So there's an example in Jacksonville. There's a company that makes perfume, and they have for years gotten complaints from the neighbors about the smell of alcohol and these pungent things wafting over large swaths of the neighborhood. And nobody really did anything until the city's environmental group got involved and went and did some air testing and said, oh yeah, you guys are wrong. Go fix your factory. But outside of that, it's really going to be situational dependent. And again, if you're not in the corner lot, it may not have an impact with visibility. So that's just going to be something that's determined case by case. And we'll, again, try and give you the best tools to understand in that situation what we think the nuisance is going to be. But that's why it says things like annoy the community or endanger the comfort, health, and repose of the safety of the citizens. These are all things out of the state statutes and laws. But it's broad on purpose. We've been through appeals before. Some of you have been through several. The important thing, and probably the thing that will come up the most if someone challenges something in the court system, well, again, we don't have an internal review process, but somebody has to go to the court. They are going to challenge you based on a number of factors with regards to how your decision was made, what considerations you made for the evidence that was presented. Did somebody just throw their feelings into it? Did you say, we're not going to approve this, but gave no reason why? So when a judge looks at it, they're basically going to say, did you follow the law? Did you follow your own rules? And was this decision made on the things that were there? They're not going to look at the content of your decision 90% of the time, because they're not there to invade our home rule with regards to lot sizes and things like that. But they are going to look at your process and determine if the process was followed correctly, and if not, how that could be addressed through the court. Sometimes, a lot of cases, they just refer it back to you for rehearing, and you get all the evidence again, you make it, and you look at it and say, okay, it still is a no, but these are the reasons why. That's perfectly fine. But this translates into, as you guys are going through your process, making sure you are following your procedures, that you're sticking to the code, and that you're basing your decisions verbally in your motions on the things that are in front of you, referencing the standards, and then saying, this lot is this small, so they should be able to get this much relief. That way, if it ever goes to court, odds are nothing's going to happen with the appeal because you've done your job well.
I think you already covered this, but I just, on this slide, think it makes sense to cover it again, which is no variance sets a precedent. And so, distant from variance to variance to variance, they're going to look at that one in isolation. Going back to D, where it's like, enforcement of the code would not deprive the applicant of rights commonly enjoyed by other parcels of land, is kind of the loose interpretation of that is, are you doing something different on this variance than you did on my buddy's variance or something like that? Is that part of the appeal process, or is it strictly, did we use these rules and call out why we've declined the variance, and is it on a standalone basis justifiable?
There are probably cases where the judge has gotten into the weeds on the criteria. It doesn't happen often. But that criteria, again, is worded similarly to most communities have something similar to that. And what it's driving at is we're not allowing something to happen that isn't allowed on properties nearby. So a good example is going to come up is accessory dwelling units. There is a very specific place, time, and thing that happens where you get an accessory dwelling unit. Somebody can't come in and ask for a variance to get that accessory dwelling unit, regardless of whether their neighbor has it or not. They have to meet those criteria like every other property in the zoning district. There may be some other issues that are acceptable that aren't obvious. You can have single-family homes in multifamily zoning. We actually have a lot of that. And to build a multifamily use, like C1 commercial is a good example, you can now have a single-family home that's been there, but if you want to build something new, there's a limit on the types of uses that you can have that are not residential. So if somebody comes in and say, hey, I'm going to put an office here, and I need a variance for parking, just because the lot next door has a house on it doesn't mean they're not entitled to that variance because of the conditions of the lot. It's really like an application of the standards and the similar properties throughout the city that, C1 commercial on 3rd Street, everybody has this problem. So, or everyone has this option for development. That's kind of the point. It may seem like it's really open to interpretation, but I think I'll see if I can find some examples for you guys to kind of read through, but I think you'll see in practice it really does make sense. But most of the time, no. The judge isn't going to look at the criteria and say, you guys have interpreted your own criteria wrong. They're going to look at, did you follow the law? Was your decision based on competent evidence? And if you can demonstrate that, they're not going to get involved. Because that's really, they're a procedural review. They don't get into our individual home rule rights. Back to what I was saying earlier. So if you have a lot that is 100 square feet smaller than the neighborhood lot, doesn't meet the minimum standard by 100 square feet, and you have a site plan that shows they want to do way more than they're really entitled to, and you say, hey, we're going to approve this, but with these conditions, based on this thing that I have in front of me that measures this way, there's absolutely no judge that's going to be like, oh, that wasn't competent substantial evidence. But if you just get up there and say, I would never, ever approve a swimming pool ever, then yes, you're going to probably lose that challenge. So it's important to verbalize that, and then when we write our final orders, we incorporate that into the final order, so we're always kind of hitting that box. This is another one of those kind of not hard, fast rules, and there's a reason. You guys are not judges. You are sort of judges. You're quasi-judicial. So you don't have to adhere to the same evidentiary rules as a judge or a court. You have a lot more leeway. But there are some boundaries to what is considered competent and substantial. If I get up and say, this shed is going to devalue my property, and I'm just the guy that lives in the house, he's not an expert on property values. So that isn't necessarily competent evidence in determining whether or not this will have an effect on that property. If it's an appraiser who comes in and says, hey, I did an appraisal on this, did comparables, and we think that this shed is actually going to reduce that property value, or it's going to block the sun at this time of day and they can't grow vegetables, whatever. That person is an expert. That testimony is competent, substantial evidence. So you have to consider it. It doesn't mean you have to decide a certain way or not, but the term for legal sufficiency is basically, can you base your decision on it? Is it something a reasonable person could look at and say, yes, I understand? There are, like I said, some stuff that's introduced before the hearing. Everybody's going to get a copy. If you meet with a developer and you disclose your ex parte conversation, that's perfectly fine. If all you guys know that you don't like this guy and you get up and vote and kind of make up some reasons, that's not going to stand as competent evidence. But it's pretty well tried in the courts that as long as it's, again, something that reasonably can be understood by somebody else, that decision makes sense based on what was presented, then you guys will be fine. Again, our basis is going to be the applicant's documents and supporting material, the staff report, and any testimony or evidence given at the hearing. When you guys have your conversation, if they didn't present an argument to address the fact that, there's a utility easement running through their backyard, it is not competent, substantial evidence for you guys to discuss that and say, hey, I think that there's a drainage easement here. We shouldn't, no one's presented that. No one's talked about that. Public Works hasn't shown up and complained about it. Because you know something, unless it's tied to a thing that you can give to the court to understand, and it's part of what's in the room when you make the decision, it's not considered competent evidence. Which is why we generally discourage you guys from visiting the sites and making some determinations, because even if you disclose that from an ex parte standpoint, if that becomes the reason why you deny something, that's not going to hold up in court, because it's not based on anything the developer or the staff or the neighbors said. It's just because you...
So if we feel that meaningful evidence has not been provided that we think should be provided, we would make a motion to defer and ask the city to review?
You can, yes.
Okay.
And I don't think I covered it in the bylaws, but you were, like I said, always welcome to call staff and discuss each item if you want, one-on-one, because there may be questions you don't know, and that's what we're here for. But if it's something that you think there hasn't been provided enough evidence to support or make your decision one way or the other, absolutely. You can defer it and say, hey, you need to go give us more, because we can't really understand whether this is right or not. So, we've generally covered what a variance is and how it's going to be strictly applied going forward. Why the variance is going to be not based on any prior approvals or precedents or things we used to do. That the hardship is related to the structure or the land and not the project or the request. And it must be a realistic hardship that's created or exists. The hardship must be a legal one, in that they cannot use their property without the variance, as opposed to I won't be able to fully enjoy my property. If I've got a commercial lot that's very small, I cannot build a shopping mall on it. And just because I want to, doesn't mean you're denied use of the property. But you can put a little real estate office and have one real estate agent in there, and that's considered a reasonable use. So the idea that they're entitled to everything in that zoning district is not correct. There are other limitations in the code that prevent that. And then making sure your decisions are obviously based on competent, substantial evidence. Let me think. There was something else I wanted to cover. In the Planning Commission side of the new code, certain uses have standard required conditions. And those are things that they can't ask for a variance from because those aren't dimensional standards. They're not landscaping standards. They're things that are specific to that kind of use. So, as an example, the accessory dwelling unit. Not only does it have to be in a certain zoning category, but you have to have a certain sized lot. You have to have a single family house, not a duplex or apartments. You have to have there's a maximum size for the unit, there's a maximum height for the unit. All that's written into if somebody approves it, these are the things they have to do. And so you may get requests that are kind of hairy when it comes to that stuff. We're going to sort that out ahead of time so you know that this request isn't going to violate that thing. Because there are things that will go to the planning commission and then come to you guys. But just understand that people might ask for things that you can't consider or give them that sound like they're dimensional standards, sound like they're parking standards, but they don't. They're not. They apply to that use and they are immovable in essence. So it's not a lot, but it does include things like daycares and shooting ranges and campgrounds, stuff like that. Things that have can have a substantial impact. So ADUs are new and there's a lot of resistance to them. So we tried to make sure that it was really clearly defined what that box is. So hopefully that won't be a conflict for you guys, but as we go through that, you'll get the hang of it. It will be in the code, but I don't think we're giving you that section because it's not really something you guys are going to deal with, but we'll provide that information if it's necessary. And I think that's all I had, so I will let Heather take over.
You guys have any follow-up questions for Christian? Not that he's going anywhere, but I think Christian did a great job in covering really what's the most important for you guys, which is these updated standards and how they're consistent with Florida law and how we will be applying them moving forward. Because while we know that the changes we made aren't going to make every single lot conforming or give everyone what they need, I think it makes it a lot better. So all these folks that are, buying a house where the developer maxed out their property so they don't have room to put a pool, well, they should now. It also will limit some of these very, very large houses we see being put on tiny lots, unless that lot warrants it, because again, there's nothing else you can do. There are some lots legitimately are 3,000, 2,500 square feet. They have to have variances or they can't build anything. So again, he covered the most important stuff for you. I'm going to be a little bit more bigger picture with the whole code. You have copies in front of you. As Christian said, it's not the entire code, but what is most pertinent to the Board of Adjustment. So Articles 1 through 7. The definitions section has gotten much, much larger. And I know in a year when we review this code, we're going to find some terms we forgot to put in there. And so we might add a few down the road as we identify some we need to provide if we can't find it elsewhere, like the Florida Building Code or Florida statutes. As far as the role of the Board of Adjustment, that remains the same. Again, we did provide some flexibility with your meetings and such and the bylaws. It's the most important thing, again, to note are those changed standards and kind of our updated process moving forward. So you guys have copies in your binders of the zoning districts and the parking standards, since those are the most things you're going to see folks requesting relief from are going to be those dimensional standards. Rarely you'll see something to do with perhaps landscaping, for example, but like Christian mentioned, if it was something really small in an area of the code like that, we would reiterate those standards to you and what they're asking for relief from. So we'll obviously, if you don't have it and you do want the whole entire rest of the code, let me know. I'll be happy to print it out for you. We just didn't want to give you stuff you didn't necessarily need.
Also, it's 321 pages.
It's also 320 pages, and so we also didn't want to, kill that many trees if we could help it. Yeah. So just some of the kind of highlights for you guys. Number one, the whole code has changed its numbering format. So Christian and I are still learning it. So if anybody says a section number, we're gonna be like, we have no idea. I have to look in the code too. Just not on the top of our heads yet of what those new numbers have or sections have been numbered. We'll get the hang of it eventually. There's also some figures and new tables in there that hopefully will be easier for some people to understand things like all of our public notice requirements, public hearing requirements. It's all in one location now. We did make those a little bit more consistent across the board with different types of applications. Christian mentioned the conditions on conditional uses, so I think that will be very helpful to the board or the planning commission, as the updated standards for variances will be helpful for this board. We did update our parking requirements. I know you guys have heard us talk about this and all the different workshops to change what the requirements are for some uses, have a little less uses in the list so that it's easier to kind of change uses without triggering a change in the parking that would result in maybe possibly a variance if the parking is appropriate for what's there and they don't need to have any kind of reduction or anything. So we don't really know what impact that'll have on parking variances. We'll have to see how that kind of shakes out as we implement the code over the next year or so. But I think something for you guys to know, and you know, please study this section and let us know if you have any questions or you want to discuss, is the ability for a commercial property to do some parking reductions for providing some alternate parking options like golf carts, EV, bike racks, scooters and motorcycles, things like that. So seeing as how we're built out and we don't have a lot of vacant land left, we don't know who and when that might get used. It could be an existing commercial property that maybe wants to retrofit. So I might go looking for like a guinea pig to kind of try this out and see if anybody wants to put in some golf cart and EV parking so we can kind of practice that formula, because it really mostly will come into play, I think, when properties redevelop and we're looking at a new building, a new use, a new parking layout and things like that.
Just real quick, so
Yeah, go ahead.
it's kind of structured basically so there's an absolute maximum reduction you can get, which for normal zoning is 30%, for downtown is 50%, but that's also based on a percentage that is reduced with everything that they do. So if you provide, good example, so if you provide a compact space and well, if you provide a bunch of compact spaces, you can only get a 5% reduction by doing that. And it's basically 1% for every 5 compact spaces. So if you provide 5 compact spaces, you reduce your required size parking by 5. But ultimately, no matter how you play the game, you can only get 30% at the end. And to get that 30%, you have to do all the things, and you have to do them in the way that is prescribed in the code. And we've got new standards for what golf cart parking is and how bike parking is going to work. In essence, a bike parking space is going to have to require space for so many bikes. Like the bike rack has to be able to handle, I don't remember if it was 10 or 20 bikes. And that gets them 1 parking space reduction. But yeah, that table's in there. Kind of look at it. This is all stuff that will probably happen before anything comes to you. So they may come in looking for additional reductions, but they may have done a bunch of things to get to where they are.
But these percentages that you're talking about, they're going to be included in the staff report. So you're going to say they're putting these compact spaces in, so therefore they qualify for the 5% or what have you.
Yeah, so if they're...
So I mean, it's not something that we have to have memorized. I mean, it's going to be in the staff report.
I don't
You're
even
gonna
plan to
cover
have it memorized.
Like I'm thinking, well, I'm just thinking with the
Yeah.
like when you're talking about all of these math, you know, if we're talking like earlier, we're saying the minimum home that could be put on this lot should be at least this. And if we're talking about that, and you know, you would tell us what the difference is from what they have right now to what the minimum would be, so we don't have to do, you know,
I mean, I know John's going to be disappointed because he loves doing math,
somersaults,
but
you know, trying to figure out what the math is here, right?
because
So-
in essence, if someone's coming to you for a parking reduction, part of that discussion is going to be, well, they've already gotten a reduction of this many spaces through providing all these alternate means. They've
so it'll
maxed
be in
out
the discussion
what they
in
can
the
do.
staff
Yeah,
report.
we will explain all that in the staff
Okay.
report. Like I said, we'll probably restructure the staff reports a little bit. I know Nebs is probably having a quiet panic attack over there, but it'll be fine.
We'll do as much math as we can, which
we appreciate.
I think we've, you know, historically done in the past when it was appropriate to say this lot is this square footage too small based on the zoning district or percentage too small, or they can't get the minimum size home unless they get these setbacks. So I know those are some of the more complicated cases that you might hear. Again, a lot of what you guys are used to seeing is I have a small lot and I need a pool because my dog has arthritis or something like that. I think that's what my neighbor actually said when she came in front of you, so I apologize. but she's an attorney, so she was trying to, do her thing. But those,
Did we grant her variance?
a lot of, yes. I don't think anyone except maybe Mr. Moreland was on the board at that time. But I think those type of things you were seeing over and over and over again, hopefully you won't continue to see, because again, we've now given the allowance for additional stuff above and beyond what you can get for your house and what's required for you to have a driveway and parking for your car. So we'll see how this hashes out.
I
Yeah,
think
Matt.
the definition of permeable space changed from the time that I started on the board to even before this land development code passed, with regard to how deck spacing is considered, or how pools are considered, or how permeable pavers are treated. Is that outlined in any detail in the new code, or is that still
Yes.
something that?
And some of it's the same, some of it we've changed. I'm trying to think of a good example. So, pervious pavers is still going to be a max of 50%, and it's still going to be based on how the manufacturer determines that pervious rate. Decks, if they're over dirt, there's nothing underneath them, they're not going to count, because literally the water can go through them and hit the dirt. It's not actually covering anything.
So the deck's not getting the 50% limitation. It's just a zero.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's the way we've been doing it. It wasn't in the code before. Just even the definition of pervious versus impervious. So we've added that. We have allowed some flexibility with materials, and like Christian said, we were giving credit for pervious pavers just by policy. It wasn't in the code. So now the code specifically recognizes alternative materials where it didn't before, such as AstroTurf, and things like that. We just got to imply some common sense to some of these things that we weren't doing before necessarily.
Yeah, I just remember in 2016, I had to get rid of my driveway and put in a new one, and I was putting in pavers, and they're like, yeah, it's 100% coverage. And I'm like, it's literally 40% holes. And they're like, nope, sorry. And same thing with the deck. They're like, that's 100% coverage.
Yeah.
And to your point, I'm like, it's over dirt, and it's got a hole every 6 inches. Like, it's just,
Yeah.
But I thought, and I'm happy to hear that it's not, but I thought that the decks were being treated similar to permeable pavers, where the spacing had to be so wide, and then you got a percentage credit. But
Yeah,
you're
and-
saying that's outlined in the code more explicitly now.
Right. I don't think. I mean, in essence, yeah, that's how we were doing it, because if it wasn't, technically water could flow off. But I think it doesn't have the spacing requirement. I think it just says deck. But again,
Yeah, and some of that comes
of
down
this
to
is
Florida
like
building code and how they're
2
required
years
to
ago.
be constructed. And for anyone that has concerns about that, all the setbacks still apply. So we're still not allowing people to build right up to their property line, regardless of what it is. Residential specifically, commercial has different standards. So we still would have the buffer around the property, whatever structures are on the property, a minimum of 5 feet in pretty much every commercial or residential zoning district for every kind of structure. Someone had asked a question. Oh yeah, I'm sorry, Jennifer.
Yeah, no problem. So I'm looking at the new percentages, the 35% for the house and the driveway, and then 15% additional. So I presume that if the house, say, with the driveway is 40%, then 10% left for the accessories. Is that how we're to do it?
You got it right. So if there's
Okay.
an existing house that it's already
It's
at
over their
40%,
size.
they're still limited to 50. They don't get 15 on top of whatever they have.
Yeah.
They're still
So
limited
it's-
by that 50%.
So that's the way that would work. Okay, just making sure.
to your question, Matt, in the definitions section, there is pervious parking and pervious paving materials and what those mean. So they have been defined. And then I was going to say something else and I've forgotten.
Did you ask for a variance?
No, I didn't need one.
Can we send
To
the
get my
city
driveway
to
done.
check his driveway?
Send
As
the
long as
city-
he got a permit.
I did get a permit to build it because
you.
they spaced it out differently, but they wouldn't let me build what I wanted because it was gonna. be a
Maybe you
problem.
can now. Just make an appointment.
Well, now it's going to be a credit. It's going to be like you're way under your permeable
Oh, yeah, you
space.
built something up.
And also to Jennifer's point, there will be situations where there might be some flexibility on that 35 and 15%, depending on the circumstances. But I promise you're going to have a bunch of developers coming in and saying, I can't possibly make money if I have to include the driveway in this.
Yes.
And I was going to say, that's how it's done now, but we had a very, over and over detailed discussion with council on this, and The intent of a lot of this code is to provide neighborhood preservation and character preservation. So preventing people from building gigantic footprint houses next to small 1950s houses. So that standard is designed to be as strict as possible. If there are some situations where leeway really makes sense, we'll obviously explain that. If it's a tiny amount, there's still the chance that we can do it administratively. It still doesn't need to come to you guys, but for the most part, yeah, that's going to be a line in the sand. But expect to get a lot of requests for it. Oh no.
Someone had a question about the successive applications. I had to pull up that section. It's 34506 now. I don't know what it was before. So essentially, we took out that 25% because in some cases it was really hard to quantify because are they reducing the setback, the lot coverage, both? Just where does that fall? So we made it a little bit more gray on purpose to basically say if it's materially different, involves a change in use or decrease in the density or intensity of what they had previously been asking for that was denied, then they can come back. And that really is going to fall on staff to make that determination. And we can say, yes, we think it's different enough or no, and bring it to you guys if it is. And then it's up to the board to kind of look at that new request in light of the standards that would be applicable.
I think my question was if it's 25% pushes them under the minimum requirements, and you got a conundrum there.
Yeah,
So I thought,
yeah, that definitely could be something that happens where if they have to change it, if they have to change it by as much as 25%, then they don't meet
Then they're
the
creating
minimum
another-
house size, for example.
that's what I was thinking about.
Yeah, so that again, all that would be taken into consideration when we look at someone's request to be reheard, and then again, obviously provide that to you guys in the staff report. Like this is kind of the background. This is what they've done to reduce it, and this is the background of our recommendation. I can't remember. Did I answer that question,
did
or were
perfect.
there other ones that you guys had on that? I don't have anything else to talk about as far as like the overall. I don't think. Again, Christian covered really the most important stuff for this board. So really, just happy to answer any questions you guys have, or if any of you want to meet still and go over any questions or concerns or whatever as you review this or as we begin to implement it a little bit more. Again, we know we're going to make some tweaks and changes down the road in about a year, so we're going to be looking for some input from you guys.
The one area that I wasn't clear on when we were doing the meetings leading up to where you guys finalized was, I heard you earlier when you said for an accessory dwelling unit on a home, there has to be an air conditioner, electrical, like it can't just be like a roof. But
That's
for
for an
like,
attached.
That's just
okay,
Accessory dwelling units are literally separate,
okay,
but they can only be, I think, 500 square feet. They can only be 15 feet tall, and you can't subdivide the property.
okay. So what I wanted to get clarification on in the new code without having to read it is the townhomes that were being built that just had the little breezeway that went to no door and nothing and just is that still, how was that handled?
So we have changed the townhome definitions pretty much across the board. Two-family dwellings, which are duplexes, are not really a product in the building code anymore. They are basically attached or detached single family. So we've created a 2-unit townhome that has specific requirements associated with it, and then we've increased, like I said, the minimum lot size for all the townhomes in a unit in a block to be 25 feet, and then we've limited the size to 4 units in a row as opposed to 6. We have also created, and the strict definition of like a party wall will apply. The little awning bridge thing, what we did is basically we created in the higher density areas like around downtown what we're calling an urban single family, which based on most of those units, they are going to be standalone homes that they can build and sell one at a time or in batches if they want, but there's no little connection because it really was just a fire hazard and a way to get around the code. So now, and actually the requirements for that are slightly bigger than a townhome anyway. Like I said, we've based it on other products that have been done. So a townhome can be 25 feet wide. These have to be a minimum of 30 on the lot, and the setbacks are 5 on either side. Some of the ones we have seen, they were like 3.5 and 4.5, but fire marshal definitely prefers having 10 feet, but it's a single family home, not a townhome, so there should be some, grass and ability to work on your house and stuff like that. So it's a new product. We actually have, I think, an application for some of them coming up. So, and that may be coming too. I don't remember, because there are some wacky lots out there. But regardless, yeah, we've hopefully fixed that loophole.
So there's a new subset under single family that these are defined in here.
There's dimensional standards for where you can have them, and like I said, it's only a handful of zoning districts. But let me see if I can.
Yeah, we again created that urban single family, and it's only allowed in RM2 and CBD. So on the east side of 3rd Street, like Christian mentioned, where it's more dense. On this side, more urban. Hence why we called it urban single family. But it should kind of bridge the gap between the townhouse with the breezeway and a single family home that had more suburban standards, but that's what was allowed over here, but it didn't make sense. So we tried to create that new product to kind of fit right there in the middle. And again, like he said, I think we'll be seeing some soon, which is good because that means it worked. And no breezeway.
And it provides the option of somebody building one house instead of two, which before was pretty much their only option, to split the lot and make a duplex. Just to go over those real quick. So the minimum lot area is 3,500 square feet. The minimum width of the lot is 30 feet. The front yard setback is 20. The rear yard setback is 20. The sides are 5, because again, more urban area, so we want those to be less restrictive. The single family home at a minimum has 1,000 square feet of air conditioned space and a 1-car garage. The garage isn't counted as part of the calculation. And then they also have to provide a 2-car driveway. So they can park 2 cars in front of the house if they decide to turn their garage into a storage unit. The lot coverage, we tried to, again, kind of find the middle ground, knowing that it's a single-family home and not a townhome, but also that it's a single-family home. We've allowed a maximum lot coverage for the house and driveway to 45%, and then they get up to 60% for the accessory uses. A townhome can have 65% lot coverage, so that's kind of, somewhere in the middle. Height is obviously always going to be 35, and then that's the other thing. So for accessory uses, we've always had this kind of vague language as to where they can't go. We have basically said now, if you have a house that has a rear yard setback and a corner side yard, whatever, the accessory use of any kind can't be forward of the front plane of that house. So even if the house is 30 feet back, that accessory unit can't be at 25. It's got to be at 30 as well. That way, the house is the thing that is on the property, not your swimming pool on the street. So hopefully that will make some sense as we go forward, but that's going to be in a lot of those standards when you look at them now. It's not forward of the dwelling along the street frontage, or not forward of the front plane of the house, depending on what it is. Yeah. Multifamily actually didn't change much. We kept that about the same.
Yeah, we have, I forgot we had a table that shows all of the new dimensional standards for just all this residential zoning districts. So I'll get that email to you guys because I realized I didn't make a copy for your packet, and it would be very helpful. I've been looking at it.
Summary version,
It's just one page, so it's easy. You can just throw it in your binders.
I think it's pretty impressive work, I gotta say. I think it will also address the people who put down pavers and are even higher than a 50%. I think this will address all those,
Right.
allowing them the 15% on top of the driveways.
And because we increased what would be allowable on a single family lot, we took away the wheel strip thing. You guys remember when we added that?
I know, they were just,
Nobody liked it. Public Works hated it because gravel or whatever they put in between would go everywhere. And inevitably, whoever bought the house from the developer would fill it in anyway without a permit. And now we're just back to square one. So we just kind of eliminated that as an option because it was thrown in there to kind of alleviate some of these, going over the lot coverage just by building the house. And so that hopefully will be remedied as well. That and the pervious pavers and all the other things we've done.
Yeah. And that'll probably be something you get requests for too, is can I put in ribbon strips? It's,
Because they want a bigger house, right? And again, what's the hardship? You just want a bigger house. But we don't like wheel strips, so. What other questions you guys might have at this time?
anything else? The builders, I guess, notified us already, or when they come, how do they, just out of curiosity, how do the builders know that these apply when they?
Well, some of them have been at all the meetings and have complained about it the entire time, so they're very much aware.
Yeah, that's what we figured.
But like anything else now, I mean, people come in, and if they just turn in a permit, it gets reviewed. If it doesn't work, we'll tell them. We'll have a meeting if need be. If we get them at the early stage and they want to discuss it, we can certainly explain it to them at that point. Prior to the design, we always try and encourage people to come in and ask what they can do before they do it.
Right.
But inevitably, it'll be looked at before anything gets built. Pretty much all plans that have some element of this get reviewed by somebody in our department. So if it turns out that they've designed a house, they've got a full set of plans, and it doesn't work, well, we're going to sit down and explain to them why it doesn't work, and that, again, you're not really entitled to anything more, so you need to change your design. So you guys won't have to deal with that, but we can't deny them the right to apply.
Sure.
So there will be some grumpy people in front of you, which you're used to. So
I think a lot of our frequent flyers, as far as our developers, especially residential, were part of the process at some point.
Okay.
So they're aware. Like, as soon as the code was adopted, we're just inundated with phone calls and people walking in asking questions, and that's really died down because I think the word has gone out. We also did a lot of just outreach and putting stuff on our website and Facebook and social media just to let people know the code was changing. So I think most people know. We just haven't seen the impact of it quite yet. It's a little too soon.
Well, y'all have worked hard.
About a month.
we have seen a lot of swimming pools come through that were fine, and so there's a lot of graduation parties that are going to be fine this time. They're not going to be pushed into the summer. So
It's a hardship.
yeah.
If you guys don't have any other questions, Mr. Chair,
Well, thank you.
We're done here.
We can go on to the planning department report.
next meeting.
Do we have any?
Our next meeting's on May 20th, and we have 4 items.
May 20th is our next one.
20th,
Oh, okay.
May 20th, not April.
I thought we had one before that, but I guess not.
One before that, no.
Yeah, because we had a pause in applications. There was a
Yeah,
gap.
I restarted
That's right.
everything
Yeah,
from May
okay.
instead, so we can
Oh, we have 4.
catch up and stuff. Yeah.
All right, excellent.
So the meeting on May 20th will use the new code.
Mhm.
New code.
So you got time to study.
Okay, and then, so I had written down the 6th. Okay, and then courtesy of the Florida visitors. Anyone? Anyone? Bueller? All right. I always find that funny. Okay. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?